the show begin. Next generation for the win. We're going all in. All together now, let's begin. Let the show begin.
Thank you for joining. Actually, before we start about digital ID, John talks about how everything has now an AI tag, like AI coffee costs more, AI-powered coffee. Did you know in Penang, where I was in Penang in July, and they actually have AI-powered char kway teow now? And they charge 30% more. And it's actually fried by a robot.
Why is it 30% more?
Because people pay for the sizzle of AI. Right? So as long as you put AI before anything, you can charge more. All right, so okay, now we're going to talk about air projections. All right, so we're going to talk about air projections for 2041, and this is from IATA's forecast, which is pretty, where you talked about numbers expected to double, right? And if you look at the forecast by region, which is the next one, you'll see that Asia-Pacific is ahead of the world average, adding more than 2.5 billion passengers by 2040. So Vinoop, how much of this growth in APAC will be driven by China and India? Both of you, either. Let's go with you, Vinoop.
So you're right. These two countries, India and China, are driving the growth. I think one of the previous sessions talked about the growth in India. China today is the second largest air travel market in the world. It'll soon be number one. And we expect India, which is the fifth largest market, to go up to number 3, with the US as number 2. So these two countries will drive the growth. But obviously, there are some downside risks when it comes to geopolitical issues, which is impacting travel even today.
Right, which is what Peter referred to in his presentation. What about you? Are you seeing this in your business numbers?
Definitely. Anyway, if you look at common sense, right? So globally, India and China is 40% of the global populations, right? 1.4 billion. And if you look at current situations of China and India, China is in maybe 10 to 15 years ahead of India, but India is catching up. So look at China outbound. China outbound in 2024, we forecast around 130 or 150 million travel passengers. While currently, India is only 35 million, right? So they're still far behind. And you're looking at also domestic size. So within China, it's at the domestic trip, a year in 2024, we are forecasting around 5.5 billion trips. Billion. While in India is not bad too. It's actually 3.5 billion. So it's 2 billion less, that's all. So right now, in terms of size, China is still much greater than India. But India is also a rising star because, if you could know, India populations has now surpassed China.
Yeah.
And they have a birth rate of population growth rate of plus 0.2%. All right. While China is actually on the declining.
Okay.
Right? So if you look ahead about if you do a projections to 2030, I would say that in India, their current. Oh, we also look at the middle income people, because these are people who want to travel more in terms of flight. So the middle income group from India right now is about 31% of the population is Indian income. Mm-hmm. And the government is forecasting in 2030 to about 47%. Okay. So it's actually 50% increase, 51% increase is quite significant.
Right.
And that would actually also fuel the next, well, I guess these projections.
Yeah, so amazing numbers, right? How are we going to handle all that, right? Because we are getting into capacity constraints, aircraft. And let's look at airport development. And this is a slide that I got from your presentation, talking about the airport developments overview, right? And we can't keep building ever larger airports, right? Which is where segue into IATA's OneID initiative, which aims to streamline. Can we have the next slide? So it aims to streamline the passenger customer journey so that you can process people faster through the airports that we have, right? So look at this. This looks like the underground map of Singapore, I think, or no, New York. Anyway, it looks logical and easy, but I'm sure it's extremely complicated, right, to get to this digital ID.
I
right?
think it's more complicated than this.
Okay, so this is a simplified version of a complex problem. But anyway, you've got a lot of partners in the initiative, Trip.com being one of them, and you had the first full trial, which involved a journey on British Airways from Heathrow to Rome in October 2023. Right, so what was the key lessons learned from the trial, and when can we expect the next one?
So one of the key things, and yes, it may look like a complicated MRT map.
He says it's actually more complicated than that.
But one of the key learnings from the trial was that it works. And the technology is not rocket science. It's basically a combination of biometrics and digital credentials, something that we all use in our day-to-day lives with banking or in other sectors. And the key learning was it works. But one of the other key learnings was that in order for it to work on a global scale, we need it to be interoperable, and we need governments to come on board to allow this to happen. Because some of it is new technology, and governments always wary about it. But we have to prove that this is more secure, more reliable than your paper processes today.
So when's the second trial?
The second trial is in progress. In fact, I was on a conference call this morning, and we had some very good results. We will be showcasing the results of that at a World Passenger Symposium that IATA is holding in Bangkok at the end of this month. And the details of that are a little secret, but we have moved the trials out of the lab into the real world, and it works. Okay. And we have also shown that the same credentials can be used in 2 different locations seamlessly.
Okay.
And that is the holy grail, to make it interoperable and seamless.
And for Trip, what lessons have you learned from the partnership? And are you in on the second trial? And so you can share something that he can't share?
Oh, I can't share anything right now. It's a secret, that's what he said. So from the first trial, we learned that actually to the consumer, the traveler, that's what we want to focus on, is that it really takes a lot away the pain point. Right? Things can be much more efficient. The data could be retrieved out in a very secure way that reduces fraud from our point of view as an OTA. It also reduces errors. For example, right now, we receive like 5% of our call received or request received from our customer support team is about name change, accidentally key in wrong name. So if we have a way to retrieve those using OneID in a secure way, that will reduce friction, increase efficiencies. It also comes into our entire portfolio of products. So with OneID, I can actually design a better systems and processes among integrated product itself. So yeah, this will bring all this reduction of frictions, improvement of efficiencies into a business environment for a traveler.
I mean, we know that it's good for the customer. We know that it's good for the traveler, but the block is, like you said, the governments, right? You know. So how many governments have you got on board this initiative right now?
So we have quite a few governments involved in we have what is called a working group, which involves governments, airlines, airports, and technology providers like ICTs. And you know, we are working with governments, and it has been an education process. So me and one of my colleagues in the room back there, Siew, raise your hand. We have been doing workshops in Asia Pacific to try to educate governments to tell them that this technology works. And this response has been fairly positive, I must say.
Yeah, but it depends on them whether they can agree on all the rules and regulations and standardizations, right?
Right.
This is also
okay. So it seems to me that it's only in places where the airport, airline, and government are aligned.
Yes.
Right? That are ones making progress. So you got Abu Dhabi, Singapore being one, right?
There are many more examples.
Give me a few.
And actually, one of the best examples of OneID comes from India, where you have something called DigiYatra, which has seen, I've seen estimates of they've already facilitated 20 million passengers through the DigiYatra framework, which is essentially that, using biometrics for a contactless experience using digital identity. And what we hope to see is implementations like that, implementations like Singapore, which is on the forefront of this, having announced passportless travel, is so that these are interoperable. And it's seamless to the passenger when the passenger, say, goes from Singapore to Delhi and back. What you don't want is your mobile phone having 50 different locations. How many locations did you travel to last year?
I lost count.
Yeah. So you don't want to have that many applications.
Right. So it's going to be a long process, right? You know, like, what is it like for a company like Trip.com? Because you're so super fast, you know, like really aggressive. You want to move really fast and break things fast to work on something that is maybe, you think it will take longer to implement this than it has taken IATA to implement NDC?
Oh, that's a good point. And NDC now has a new name, offers and orders, right? Now, NDC was a huge undertaking because it involved changing airlines' passenger systems, which are big, complex animals. What OneID is, it's not about changing passenger systems within the airline, but more about how the airline system, say, integrates with other agencies, with the airport and others. And we believe we have a roadmap over the next few years, but we will start to see implementations fairly soon in this regard.
So it's less complicated.
Less complicated.
Do you agree with that?
I think so. Yes. NDC still have a lot to improve.
Okay, the name of NDC to offer and order, is that a big change in how you do air retailing?
I would say not so much, because a lot of offer and orders are actually doing it in-house at this moment on the Trip site. We just need a standard. We just have to follow a standard. The concept is actually not a brand new concept.
All right. Okay. So let's come back to the airport, right? Because I think it's where a lot of the blocks are, right? You know, and so CT, I mean, besides OneID, I heard about your partnership with Istanbul Airport, where you do virtual interlining for Trip.com customers. And I understand that it's a first of its kind of partnership with an airport. Like, what does it entail?
Well, it's the first time we actually partnered with an airport that we create virtual interline for different airlines. What we do with the Istanbul Airport is to make the customer experience more seamless. So first, the customers actually, we have a dedicated information desk for customers to go for express service. So they can get a fast-track express service. They also get discounted service for lounges, a buggy and a sleepover area and so forth. So we're also working with the airport to see how we can actually do the back check through. So that will be something that we need to, the last hurdle we need to go through for virtual interline. I can't say anything about that yet at the moment. We are still in exploratory phase.
Right. So what has that done for your, so the idea is basically for Trip.com customers. Is that only from China now, or is it Trip.com worldwide to go through Istanbul? Is that that's the objective?
Actually, yeah, so worldwide, but currently we're using China as the test point. Reason because also if you look at Istanbul Airport, the Chinese flight comes in is from one side of the airport. For them to go to the other international site is a very long journey. Yeah. So we try to make that journey a bit faster, even with buggy and so forth.
Right.
So giving better customer experience.
Right. So have you seen OTAs think about this kind of partnerships before we can get OneID, right? Let's solve the problem one step at a time.
Yeah. So you know, and I think the examples that were mentioned, this is all part of what we call modern airline retailing, at the risk of throwing out another term out there. But OneID is right now focused on the airport experience. And I think there was a comment made earlier about having to show your passport 9 times or trying to prove who you are 9 times. Digital identity and biometrics is going to solve that problem. But then you can then use the same identity for services beyond the airport, for your hotel booking, for your car rental, and for a completely seamless end-to-end travel. And that's what we are working towards.
Right, and is that something that Trip.com, I mean, you know, Tim Hughes, I think on one of the panels when we asked, like, if you could make a wish of Trip, I said AI Genie, I didn't say Trip Genie, okay, of the AI Genie, he said that my wish would be like I could get my data in my wallet and then I choose who I share it with without sacrificing privacy.
Yeah.
Right. If you had an AI Genie, what would you wish for?
Oh, if I have a travel assistant, of course, if I empower this AI Genie to do all my travel arrangement, I travel so much that even my PA right now are unable to keep track. So making the right booking for me to go to the next meeting on time, to calculate from the airport to take the assumptions of also the traffic jam in certain locations to reach the meeting, that would be fantastic.
Okay.
Right now, it's all manual.
So do you think we will get to a OneID world first before offer and order?
I think it will be a little bit of both.
Like, what kind of answer is that? A little bit of both. Which one will go first?
We had people before that who were given a choice and said both. So I'm also saying both.
I'll give you that choice. You.
Our wish is one order first.
One order
ID
first.
first. It's one
Offer
order.
and order first.
No, it's actually offer and order and OneID, right?
Yeah.
I would choose OneID first.
OneID first.
OneID to go first.
Okay, because that seems to be the bigger problem.
Correct.
Because then we can move more people through the airports, right?
And I'm sure that we can't do, even if we can't do all so many countries, we can do at least selected sectors, right?
Just like the quarantine lanes.
Yes.
Remember
Last
when
time
we used that model, like you remember when we had to do the corridors for the quarantine? Is that the model that you're using?
But COVID taught us one thing: digital certificates work.
Indeed.
And we are building off that, and the government's faith in the digital certificates and digital credentials. And actually, that's probably the small silver lining of COVID from aviation tech.
Right. It sort of opened their eyes to the fact that you could sort of build this travel corridor and people could travel. Okay.
It's more reliable than the paper certificate.
All right. So you heard Peter's presentation, right? So after the presentation, do you feel like you're in the wrong industry? I'm sorry, I'm just being... But I want to come back to sustainability because he said we didn't talk about it, which is not true, Peter. We have been talking about it in almost all the sessions. But anyway, sustainability, something IATA is also deeply involved in, right? And we've had Air New Zealand recently became the first airline to scrap its 2030 science-based carbon intensity reduction target. It scrapped it. What does this mean for the overall industry?
Look, as an industry, we are focused on our net zero goal by 2050. And we believe it is achievable. Now, interim targets and by different stakeholders may be different, but as an industry, we're working towards that goal. And I think Peter had included some statistics. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be a combination of SAF, offsets, and carbon capture and other mechanisms. And it's not going to be cheap. We just released a financial roadmap, and where it says there's some estimates that it'll cost between $4 to $5 trillion between now and 2050. It's a tall order, but as responsible corporate citizens of the world, the industry has put its stake in the sand and said net zero by 2050, and we'll get there, but we can't get there alone. Again, we need governments to make sure that there's enough SAF produced in the world at a cost that is palatable, and other stakeholders need to come on board.
Okay, so that's by 2050.
Yep.
That's your goal. Okay. Right, so coming back then to Trip, right? Because you see customer behavior.
Yeah.
And I think we have a chart here on how different customers behave in different markets towards sustainable travel options. So CT, if you could walk us through this chart.
Well, before we go through this chart, just to let the audience know that in the Trip.com app, we actually, for every single flight, we actually display the carbon footprint and also allowed consumer to do filtering on a lower carbon emissions flight itself. Then in every single purchase, you have the options to buy a carbon offset program. And this program is just supported by an international standards organization called Choose. So based on that, so every single app's site that we have, we will have consumers who are able to purchase this program. What you're seeing here is that the adoption rate of this program itself, customers who actually really pay out hard cash for carbon offset. And if you can take a look, Europe seems to be much more higher than Asia and also American countries. So in the Euro side, Netherlands, Switzerland, Austria, Germany, Belgium, these are the top adoptions, people who really, consumers who really bring up the dollar. What we found is that the consumer awareness. I think in Europe, the consumer awareness are much more higher.
Yeah.
The government actually pushed for a lot more actions. And then also the consumers actually really put in the efforts to address these issues. Well, in Asia, I think we are lagging behind.
Well, you see Australia clearly.
Australia is much better, yeah. But for Asia's like, I'm glad to see Singapore, there are still people adopting it. But unfortunately, Malaysia,
actually,
Thailand,
Singapore
Korea
and Hong Kong is not bad on par, and Taiwan, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, again, carbon offsets are one piece of the puzzle. Ultimately, you need to reduce the carbon dioxide that you're producing. So that's through more efficient operations, better engines, more efficient aircraft. That'll solve your problem to a certain extent. Then SAF is carbon, 80% reduction over the life cycle of the fuel. And that's, yes, you have to do some market-based measures like carbon offsets. But I think in the previous presentation, there were some comments about the credibility of these programs.
Exactly.
And that is very important because the last thing you want is to spend all that money and not actually do any good. So,
absolutely. Okay, so rapid fire. We're going to end on a rapid fire. CT, if you could design your own airline, what would the theme be and what would it be called?
An airline. USS Enterprise.
USS Enterprise. Okay.
Boldly go where no one's gone before. Star Trek.
Okay. And Vinoop, if you could time travel to fly on any historic aircraft, which one would it be and why?
747-400.
Why?
And the upper,
The upper deck.
Upper deck. That was grand, and felt big. Some of the A380, you don't have that exclusivity, so it's still...
Okay. So CT, if you could sit next, so imagine you have a digital ID and then you could tell like who's going to sit next to you, and
okay.
Because he also has he or she has a digital ID as well. So if you could sit next to any famous person on the world's longest flight, who would it be?
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk?
On his SpaceX shuttle.
On his SpaceX shuttle. All right, okay. And Vinoop, since we're talking about airports, what's your favorite airport code and why does it stand out to you?
Airport city code. So I don't know if you guys know, but airport codes are assigned by IATA. And I think for me, the best code is always for Singapore, SIN, Sin City.
Sin City. We all live in Sin City. We love it. Thank you. Please join me in thanking Vinoop. Thank you. And CT, thank you so much.
They're ready now. Let the show begin. Next generation for the win.